Okay, here we go. All right, ready when you are.
All right. Welcome, everybody. We are really excited to have you join us today for If You Build It, Will They Come? How to Design and Market an In-House Online Program. I'm super excited for Allison and I to speak to you today. Each of us looks at this from a slightly different point of view. So I come from the university side, while Allison joins us from the agency side. My name is Krista Payne. I am Assistant Dean at the Tulane University School of Professional Advancement. Just a little bit about our school before we begin. We're the school that works with adult learners like many of you. We offer applied learning programs that incorporate both industry relevant knowledge and a grounding in the liberal arts. Over the past 5 years, we've revised most of our programs and launched new ones, including 9 online master's degrees and multiple stackable online graduate certificates, in addition to our undergraduate bachelor degrees. And now I'll turn it over to Allison to introduce herself.
Hey everyone, I'm Allison Zarang, the Director of Accounts at Search Influence. We're based in New Orleans, but we're now fully remote, and we're an agency founded in 2006 after Hurricane Katrina. And a little bit about our backstory is it was a husband and wife team, and they took what was then, a hurricane decimated, really small chiropractic clinic as their first client, brought them from, disaster recovery mode into a blooming new location in Uptown New Orleans, all through digital marketing. So today we are a full service digital agency, and we specialize specifically in education and higher education, tourism, and the medical markets. In the last couple of years, I'm particularly proud of some of the work we've done in partnership with Krista and the Tulane School of Professional Advancement. And so I look forward to sharing some of our effective insights with you today.
Great, thanks, Allison. So SOPA was the only school at Tulane, there's 7 schools here, to run A/B testing. In 2018, we launched 2 programs with an OPM, with an outside provider, while simultaneously we launched 2 graduate programs that we built totally in-house. And we went on to launch an additional 2 more programs in-house and then build on 3 existing programs. So we're able to look at it from a couple of different angles. So when you are deciding if you have the capacity to build a program yourself in-house without an OPM, it can seem really overwhelming. I get it. So we've broken this up into 4-step process. 1, identify the industry and academic opportunity. 2, assess your student population. 3, strategize and run digital marketing. And 4, monitor the viability of the program with data. And actually, before I move on, I forgot to mention something that you will see in the side. There's a chat. We are monitoring the chat, so please put your questions in there, and we will address them in the chat throughout this presentation, as well as we're going to be sharing polls with you. These polls are public to all you guys in this session, so please make sure to fill them out, because it's going to help share some really interesting marketing data among all of us. Okay. So number 1, identify the industry and academic opportunity. First, identifying the gap in the market. So this might seem obvious, right? But it's often overlooked, especially if there's an administrator or director on your team really pushing for a program. Faculty members should really believe in their programs. That's why they're teaching or leading in their subject matter, but they may overestimate the marketing demand for the subject matter. So you really have to look at the data. Program creation should be based on data, not gut feelings, and you'll need to look at multiple perspectives. As marketers, you're going to need to bring your expertise to the table at this early stage. Sometimes we're brought in much later, right? Like, oh, we're launching this huge new program. We've decided all the courses. If you can set up a system and a process where you're brought in to the early stage, it's much easier to effectively market a program where you were involved from the beginning. So one way to do this is to work through an industry and academic opportunity checklist. I understand that some schools have more resources than others, and you can contract with outside groups to address each of these areas, but you can also do these areas with your internal team. Also, just a little plug for UPCEA. They are a great resource that we have used at Tulane, and Jim Fong, we love them, to assess opportunities. So one, conduct your market research. We know that adult learners are concerned about job opportunities. Students are asking, how will earning a degree help me progress in my career? But often if you use an outside research firm, they're looking at like the 30,000 foot view of the market, of the labor market. You really need to make sure that your local and regional market can support your graduate. Use BLS, Bureau of Labor and Statistics. Use job posting sites. If you can afford it or have access, use a service like Burning Glass. Two, conduct local focus groups. Don't only listen to the outside experts. Talk to the people who know your local markets. If you haven't formed industry advisory boards for each of your programs or degrees, this is a great place to start. They can also be advocates for your program. You really need to talk to them to make sure the market isn't saturated with employees or people who already have these degrees. Number three, conduct academic institution research. You need to look at your peers, look at both degree and course offerings from other universities. How do they deliver their courses? If everyone is offering on campus, can you go online? Is there an institution that's a regional competitor but offers online degrees? How do you stack up against them? Do you already offer something similar within your university or your department? Don't cannibalize your audience. And I'm going to get to how we did that later. And finally, assess pathway opportunities. Consider creative ways and creative pathways for your prospects. Program directors and faculty, they might only think in terms of like a master's degree, but look at grad certificates that might stack into a master's or academic credits that can help. All right, next we want to look at assessing the student population. So there's no right answer when you're assessing the student market, but make sure you ask yourself these three questions. Are you expanding your current market or are you entering a new market? At Tulane, we expanded our current student market by offering an emergency and management master's degree, which was a direct expansion of our Homeland Security undergrad program. So we had a pipeline of students there. Alternatively, we also launched a Master of Public Administration, which tapped into a completely new market for us. Next, have you determined if the market demands on-ground, online, or hybrid? Do you know what your students prefer? Have you determined your geographic reach? Outside firms might tell you like, oh, online programs, you could go anywhere in the country, even the world. But really what research shows is that even online programs really usually have a regional reach for enrollment. Do you have the capacity to market and reach the new population? What do you need in terms of money and employee capacity to market your programs? And finally, are there internal institutional barriers? Are there other degrees and schools in your university that are similar? For us, we had to look at our School of Science and Engineering had a Master of Computer Science. We had to differentiate our Master in IT Management. All right, for a minute, I know we're marketers, but let's talk money. So, if you spend enough money, you will reach your cohort goals. This was an actual quote from someone selling OPM services. And we tried this at Tulane. We had great buy-in and support from our university administration. We put a huge investment from the university into the OPM to market compared to our in-house investment, which we had to fund ourselves. The cost per lead, the cost per application, the cost per enrollment was significantly less for in-house. And we still had better yield. We can trace this back to not doing some due diligence on the front end on our part, particularly thinking about online programs and the reach for regional and local level, and looking at the labor data to support the need. So with that, you need to develop a program budget. I know you guys might not be involved in this, but you should try and insert yourself a little bit and form a partnership with your budget office and with your dean as these budgets are developed, because you want to make sure all these areas are worked through. So number one, you need to set cohort goals, including retention rate, average course enrollments, attrition, graduation rates, and this will be based on your research. I always suggest underestimating. Developing a staffing structure and cost. Who do you need to hire? Is there anyone who can do it internally but may need increased compensation? What can be outsourced? What needs to be a permanent hire? Number three, what is your course development and instructional design cost? So if you're doing this in-house, do some courses exist that you can easily build on? Is this going from an on-ground program to online? How experienced is your school in developing online courses? Or is there another part of the university you can work with to help you develop these rather than having to go to an outside firm? Develop a marketing budget. Now, we know this is your wheelhouse, but this is where, do you have an average cost per lead, cost per inquiry, cost per app, cost per enrollment? Is this going to change with the new program? You're really going to have to front load your marketing expenses in the first few years in the launch period as you're getting the word out, and that needs to be taken into consideration. And finally, determine the timeline for net profitability, ideally no more than 5 years before you break even. So, as I mentioned, we weren't as successful from a financial standpoint from working with an OPM. This is just an example, but for our in-house programs, we were much more realistic about our cohort goals, and we were able to reduce marketing spend by being much more strategic. We still outsource marketing, but with a local partner, and we search influence here, and we removed the OPM as the middleman, which was a huge savings in both time and money. We also brought all of our course development and recruitment in-house, also a huge time saver. And so in this example, we become net profitable in year 5. I know that was a lot. Put your questions in the chat, and now I'm going to turn it over to Allison.
Thanks, Krista. So now that Krista's covered how to identify industry and academic opportunity and how to assess your student population, we're going to move into talking more about how to actually go to market with your new program. So first, a quick caveat, we're going to talk a lot about digital strategies, but of course, all recruitment and admissions events require marketing support, and they're still useful today. A lot of them are going digital, but they're still a critical part of your enrollment funnel. So although most marketing is going to be done by digital means now, the recruitment team is still doing these on-ground events and now likely many virtual events. So if your marketing and admissions teams are not meeting at least weekly to discuss all of these events, networking opportunities, and how marketing can support, we strongly suggest that you start. With that aside, we're going to dive into more about student personas. So the best marketing strategies start with a clear understanding of the ideal student and the broader prospective student population. The foundation will be all of the target market research that Krista already talked about. We tend to use buyer personas, which are a fictional, generalized representation of your ideal student for your program. They help you understand those prospective students better and make it easier for you or for the marketing team to tailor your marketing and recruitment to specific needs, behaviors, and concerns of these different groups. So again, you want to start by taking the target market research that you've already done in Krista's earlier discussion and define the basic demographics of your target students. Keep in mind that demographics are the facts. These are things that are not arguable. General age ranges, geographic location of your target student, what prior education is either required or are they likely to have, prior work experience, job titles, or household income. But beyond that, to make student personas really effective, we want to take it a step further and get a little more personal. We want to think about what are this person's goals, challenges, and aspirations. And then you need to get a bit introspective. In what ways does your program answer this student's needs or problems? What are the features and benefits, just like a typical product, that will be most compelling to this student? And that is what we want to use in our marketing and our messaging. So how do we collect this information? First, you want to start with the industry and academic research conducted in steps 1 and 2 that Krista talked about. The work that you did to assess your student population really should become the foundation of your persona. You should also draw on competitor data. So take a look at your peers. What does their ideal student appear to be, and who are they targeting, and is there a gap that you can hone in on? Perform interviews with your faculty, professionals in the field, and even your current students who you think represent your target. The strongest buyer personas are based on market research, as well as on insights that you gather from your actual customer base or student base through surveys or interviews. So here's an example of a student persona for Tulane School of Professional Advancement. This is Joanne. Take a moment to review her persona. She's a fictional prospective student for our Master's in Public Administration program. She provides a consistent view of SOPA's core targets for this campaign and gives our team, the Search Influence team, the assets we need to vet our marketing strategies and ensure that they make sense in terms of reaching the target and answering their unique goals and challenges. So next we'll talk a bit more about actual marketing strategy. So before we can get into tactics that I want to make sure we cover, we need to understand some basics about the funnel and the student journey. The marketing funnel is really the steps along the path to conversion, and that conversion being an enrolled student. So what are the steps it takes to get someone from being aware of your program all the way into becoming an enrolled student? As you well know, it likely includes inquiring, starting an application, and completing an application. The student journey is the active research process and behavior that that prospect demonstrates leading up to their decision to apply and enroll as a student. So we want to use the student's journey as a framework to understand the prospect's needs and provide the information that they need to make the decision about your program. So the marketing funnel is somewhat universal, and it's the university's perspective, whereas the student journey is your student's perspective, and it should direct your media planning, your messaging, your calls to action throughout your website and your landing pages, and any other collateral that you're offering to your prospects. So from a digital perspective, what are we trying to achieve? There are key performance indicators that we use to measure success throughout the funnel and measure whether our target is moving through the different stages of the funnel as we would like them to. As awareness, the prospect is aware of their desire for career advancement. So the KPI here may look something like audience engagement with your website or your social media or even your ads, or your recruiting team making contact with them. In the consideration phase, they might be spending more time on your website, actually downloading digital content that you're offering, making an inquiry, or making an introduction at a recruiting event. They could also be getting into program-specific consideration, where they're inquiring about specific programs or degrees, visiting campus or doing a virtual tour, which is more likely today, or making an appointment or making a call to talk to a program director or an advisor. And then in the decision phase, this is where we're really starting to see the true conversion come to life. This is where the prospect is starting an application and then becomes almost its own little funnel of funneling that student from that started application through completion. And lastly, conversion. This all culminates in the prospect or the applicant actually becoming an enrolled student and registering for classes. So I want to talk a little bit about key digital tactics that we use to reach our student personas throughout this phase of the funnel. You'll see that some tactics are repeated throughout the funnel. What differs is how they are applied. So for Tulane SOPA, we use a combination of all the tactics you see here. I know there's a lot here represented on the slide. I want to call out a few specific ones that are particularly effective and were particularly effective for us for the MPA. So first is website optimization. Blog content on your site that highlights specific career outcomes for your prospective student has pulled prospects at the awareness phase, and where program-specific content speaks more to users who are comparing you to other schools in the consideration set. Lead generation ads are also particularly effective. We use these forms that live directly on Facebook or Instagram and allow the prospect to request more information without ever having to leave that platform where they're spending their time and they're engaging. And the forms are pre-populated with their contact information, which makes it very easy for them to convert. Another really effective tactic for us is gated content downloads. We see this really as an exchange of value. You're offering program-specific information to the prospect in exchange for them to give you your contact information, which then enables us to put that prospect in our email and our text message nurture campaigns so that we can continue to nurture them through their decision-making process. And then lastly, but of course not least, is email and text nurture campaigns. We'll look at some examples in a moment, but these tactics allow us to nurture the prospects from consideration to starting and finishing their application and even ultimately through to enrollment. So once your key digital tactics are defined and mapped to your student journey via the funnel, it's time to start defining the digital platforms through which you're going to target your audience. Using our personas is where we will identify where are they spending their time and on what platforms provide the best opportunity for us to reach them. Within those platforms, there's of course many levers to pull in targeting settings in order to best reach them. So we'll talk a little bit about some of our favorites. But I will start with saying that for any digital platform that you plan to advertise on, you're going to need some basic information. Demographics, like we talked about, already defined for your student personas. And then of course, your geographic targeting, going back to what Krista said. You might not want to necessarily start nationwide or internationally, and you might want to give this some thought. Where do you really want to geographically target? So next, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of our most effective targeting tactics, especially in the world today, post-pandemic or mid-pandemic, and what's really working. So first is pixel-based audiences. These are some of our favorites because it allows us to target people based on their past behavior online. So for example, someone who may have visited your site but not yet inquired, we can target them through what's called pixel-based audiences. Second is a custom audience. This is where we can upload, say, an email list of prospects, or if we purchased a list from a great industry association, we can upload that list and allow the platform to find and serve ads to those individuals whenever possible. One of our ultimate favorites is lookalike audiences. This is something available in platforms like Facebook. It's a great way to expand your audience in a way that's smarter, not harder, and it takes out a lot of the guesswork. You can upload an email list, just like we talked about for custom audiences, of prospects or actual applicants, and allow the platform to find the common data points between that list of individuals and serve ads to more people who look like them. This is extremely helpful when you are expanding within a given program. For example, we grew our emergency and security program and wanted to target people who are already interested in a master's that is similar to an existing degree. Next, somewhat foundational is keyword and keyword contextual targeting. This is where users are searching for key terms related to your degree or your offerings, or they're reading content that includes keywords that indicate that content's relevant to your degree or to your audience. And we use that to target people as well. And lastly is something called addressable. This is becoming much more important in the pandemic because it has majorly impacted household TV consumption. People are moving, they're cutting the cable cord and they're moving from cable to streaming services. And this is an option that allows you to serve ads based on the individual household, as opposed to placing an ad in a given television program, for example, that would then reach every household watching that program. Now you can actually customize ads to individual households who might be watching the same content or streaming the same content. And don't be afraid to look a little bit more into what's called OTT or connected TV advertising. There are definitely opportunities to use that platform at all budget levels. So a well-rounded campaign is going to employ both broad and niche targeting. I know I just gave you a lot of different targeting tactics, but when in doubt, use broad targeting to start and let these platforms, these digital platforms, optimize based on what is working. Don't think that you know better than the data. So we'll share a little anecdote about our own experience. So when we first launched ads with SOPA back in 2017, our campaign structure was quite complicated. Every degree had its own campaigns, both display and remarketing campaigns. And so what we were also we were also targeting very broadly geographically. So we found that by testing different tactics, we were able to really simplify the campaign and actually improve performance. So first, what we did was hone in our geographic targeting for both undergraduate and graduate. As Krista mentioned, we started out targeting the entire US, but honed this in to focus on the Gulf South, where we knew that Tulane University has a great brand footprint. Next, another simplification we made was we stopped using individual campaigns or stopped having individual campaigns for every undergraduate degree at the awareness or display level and decided to move to a general undergraduate display campaign. This was because we saw the data told us that 80% of our undergraduate student population did not have a specific degree of interest when they enrolled or when they began their application. They planned to declare that after they were enrolled. So we were able to realize that these degree-specific undergraduate targeting really wasn't all that relevant. We're able to become more streamlined and efficient by having a general undergraduate campaign with the same broader messaging rather than having this program specific for that audience. And then we decided to no longer do remarketing on an individual degree level as well. We kept the awareness messaging for undergraduate, and for each graduate degree, we created a simplified remarketing campaign for any inquiry who had not yet applied. What we realized was that they didn't need messaging specific to the degree that they've already inquired about. They already know what they're interested in. What they needed was that additional push to apply, and that messaging could be unified and universal. So again, any inquiry that hadn't yet applied was seeing a call to action of apply now, as opposed to a degree specific call to action. What we found is that with each simplification, we've seen improvement in performance, both in terms of volume of conversions, inquiries and applications, but also more cost-effective conversions, which means we're paying less for each inquiry or each application coming through. So once you've finalized your targeting, your next step is to address the unique goals and challenges of your personas in your creative. So here you can see a few ads that we deliver on digital display networks and social media for our persona, Joanne, that we looked at earlier. We speak to Joanne's interest in the nonprofit sphere through our messaging. We speak directly to her desire to grow her professional network and to her need for flexibility. I'm going to show you a few additional examples of how to speak directly to your target personas in your creative assets, because it does extend beyond just the ad. So first is the experience you provide immediately following an ad click is really crucial. This is where your website, your landing pages, your gated content downloads, which is what you see on the right side of the slide, should continue addressing your target's needs while highlighting your program's unique points. Those aspects that set you apart from other schools in the prospect's consideration set are really important to emphasize at this phase of the student's journey. Affordability is a primary concern for our target persona, Joanne, but also more generally now in the post-pandemic world, we're seeing that people are concerned about finances and how they're going to finance their education. So our email and text campaigns speak directly to that concern. We highlight all of the resources available, and we've created resources to point our prospects to. For example, a custom tuition calculator that we've built on SOPA's website. It allows our prospect to enter their individual circumstances and then estimate their actual costs to earn their degree or join the program that they're interested in at SOPA. With regard to our specific persona, Joanne is a military veteran. So this tuition calculator helps her to understand the military discounts that are available to her through SOPA. So once you strategize your campaigns, you have creative that is speaking directly to your personas and you're ready to launch, you want to make sure that you're set up to measure success as you move through the campaign. So a few quick things here. First, you have to define the industry metrics that you'll use for comparison. So when it comes to marketing, you're looking at cost metrics like cost per 1,000 impressions, click-through rate, conversion rates, cost per click. How can you benchmark to know if your campaigns are performing well? Cost per inquiry and cost per application are, of course, the ultimate. Determine your own comparable programs to benchmark against. So this can be challenging if you're entering or you're launching a brand new program and you don't have a comparable degree, but it's especially useful if you're expanding within a given program. Use other program data, other launches that you've gone to market and how your campaigns performed so that you can benchmark against it and see how you're doing, like Krista was talking about. And then lastly, you can compare to reliable sources that are already out there. In the digital sphere, WordStream is a really great resource. They offer industry benchmarks for education for things like cost per click, cost per 1,000 impressions that we're able to benchmark against, and they keep that data up to date. And in higher education, UPCEA, Jim Fong is an excellent resource when it comes to benchmarking, and as Krista said, has helped us a ton. Okay, so wrapping up, it's really important that you plan to check and adjust on your campaigns. You need to continue monitoring the success to make sure that you're on track to meet, or in the case of the MPA at SOPA, exceed your enrollment goals. When you're running paid advertising, up to the first 3 months can really be considered a learning phase. This is the time period that it takes for the ad platforms to learn and essentially develop what patterns are working best in your campaigns. Here, I have 2 different checklists that you can use at your 3 and your 6 month milestones. You want to be strategic as you make changes and keep your adjustments incremental. You won't want to make major changes or too many changes at one time, especially at the start of a campaign, because it can throw off platform machine learning, which has is really crucial and has become really useful to rely on for some of our optimizations. And with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Krista to wrap us up, sharing some insight on assessing program viability.
Thanks, Allison. So the final piece is monitoring the viability of your program with the data. So you want to decide on the timeline before you launch. Sometimes you're going to have to build the plane while you're flying it, but it's better if you can do some main benchmarks. So you're not going to know enough to make a long-term decision after year one, but you will know enough to make adjustments. And each year builds on and includes the data from the prior year. So at the end of the first semester, you're looking at your cohort goals, your yield and expenses. And at the end of year one, you're looking at overall retention, revenue, and expenses. At this point, you can say, are your expenses too high? Are your geo targets off? At the end of year two, you're going to look at your net profitability as well as your partner evaluation. And that's not just around marketing, but also around instructional design, multimedia, your enrollment team. Do you have the right partners? Are they all working together effectively? And then at the end of year three, you're going to start looking at all the cost per inquiries, per leads, per applications that Allison went over so thoroughly. At SOPA, we launched a Master's of Emergency Management, and at the same time, we also launched a Master's of Security Management. And by using these timeline benchmarks, we made the decision to reduce expenses, reduce cohort goals, and we're working to turn one of them into only certificates because we realized we were cannibalizing our audience. Conversely, we're a year into our MPA, we've exceeded cohort goals every semester and revenue by large margins. So we're actually expanding and paying down the investment more quickly. We realize that by continuously looking at the benchmarks in the first 2 years. And finally, at the end of year four, you're going to review all your data and decide, are we going to continue, adjust, or end, and then spend that next year executing your final decision. So I know we went through that quickly. Thank you so much for your time. Please put your questions in the chat, and you have mine and Allison's emails here. Please feel free to reach out with emails, and thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Okay, let me stop recording.